Hey guys, Matt Goodwin. How popular are Nigel Farage's policies?
Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has declared his party, quote, the opposition to Labour, after an opinion poll showed it had overtaken the Conservatives for the first time. And it's just one poll, but it's the latest evidence suggesting that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is heading for a heavy election defeat.
It's a good question, given that Farage and his party Reform are now averaging 18% in the national polls, and they are going to have a significant impact at the general election.
Now, a response to that bombshell Farage announcement just now?
Well, I think we've just witnessed a seminal moment, a turning point in British political history, and I think that Nigel Farage will win in Clacton, and I think that he has thrown a bombshell into this election campaign, which will be extremely damaging to the Conservative Party.
If you listen to people in the elite expert class, they'll tell you that this is just about populism, it's about protest politics. People are voting against the system, they're not voting for what Nigel Farage is offering.
You know, apart from Rishi Sunak and his small circle in the Conservatives, and acceptance that Tories are going to lose the general election, probably quite badly. Again, it may not be anything like what the polls say right now. We know there's a lot of don't knows in there, a lot of people who won't vote, a lot of people who haven't decided yet and may, well, if they old Tory voters go back to the Tory party, they may choose to vote Lib Dem, Green, who knows? We don't know where they'll go rather than Labour. But in that event, it's all about what happens next. So we've got Nigel Farage wanting to take over the Tories, he said. We've got loads of Tory members, Tory MPs, including many of those in your popular conservatism group, who would like to sort of to seize control of the party. What do you think is the most likely event to happen?
I think we can't know or tell. That how the cards fall entirely depends on how people vote. Every individual's vote matters in this election, and each constituency matters, and who is re-elected. I think it's highly likely Reform will fail to get a single MP. They're putting a lot of resources into my local constituency of Boston and Skegness, but there doesn't seem to be much traction locally. That they are essentially a protest vote, but they're not a serious party of opposition, and people recognise that.
But I've got some exclusive polling data that I'm going to share with you towards the end of this video that's going to blow that narrative apart. But first, just consider the real core issue that's behind Farage and his party, and that's immigration.
Conservatives have just lied. If they'd said to me, 14 years ago, we believe in open door immigration, we don't believe in controlling immigration, you can then vote for that. You can say, well, that's fine. I'm a globalist. Let everyone come in. It enhances our country and we need the workers. If that's your view, your belief, great.
If you look at Britain today, public support for reducing immigration is a majority view in 80% of all seats in the country. That's not me saying that. That's based on research by the think tank Onward. We know that a large majority of Brits want to lower the rate of immigration into the country.
In terms of your priority, where are you starting? Immigration and then economy? Or
Immigration, really, because I think it affects the economy.
We also know they've become much more sceptical about immigration. They're basically no longer really convinced that immigration is strengthening Britain or making it a better place to live. Now, the elite expert class hate this because for them, pro-immigration is basically becoming a new religion that they use to show their status, their sense of moral righteousness to other members of the elite while looking down on everybody else in the country.
But do you want net migration to go up or down?
Well, as I said, it's not sensible to have that kind of a target-based approach.
It's not really a target, it's just the general idea of where Labour stands on migration. Do you want to see it go up? Are you comfortable with it going up, or would you rather see it come down?
Well, what we would see if we had an immigration system that was working properly would be potentially in some areas where there's a short-term need for skills, you could see in the short term actually people who are coming in increasing in number.
Farage and Reform have realised that actually not many people think the same way as the elite class, and what they're saying is we need to dramatically lower the rate of migration, we need to stop the small boats, but we also need to start prioritising the British people. So what do we find when we actually polled voters about those reform policies? Well, take their signature policy, stopping all non-essential migration into Britain, namely stopping all forms of migration that don't contribute to things like the National Health Service. I asked voters, what do you think about this? Remarkably, half of all voters in Britain agree with that Reform Party policy. Half. But here's the interesting thing. zoom in on those 2019 Conservative Party voters, zoom in on all those people who voted Boris Johnson in 2019. Among those voters who are absolutely key to Farage's revolt, 76% of them said, you know what, I agree with that policy, let's freeze all non-essential immigration.
More than 1 million people, including their families, have come to the UK on foreign student visas since January 2021. Not everyone goes home when their visa expires, including Danabal from India.
Was it always your intention that you wouldn't actually be a student? It was just a way of getting a visa?
This is the only reason for that. I just want to save my life.
But you didn't ever plan to be a student?
No.
Let's take another issue. What about slashing foreign aid, the amount of foreign aid that Britain sends to other countries? Some people say we should be spending much less, maybe 50% less, and that would give us about £6 billion that we could spend on things like the National Health Service, schools, police and defence and so forth. This is, again, one of Reform's policies, slashing foreign aid by 50%.
We know there's huge amounts of waste in foreign aid. We could reduce the amount we spend on foreign aid, saving another £6 billion or so every year. These are huge savings. This is a completely different way of running our economy. I believe it's achievable. We know it's achievable. That's why we put this forward.
How many people agree with that? Among all voters, 58% say, I quite like the sound of that. Among 2019 Conservative Party voters, check this, 83% agree with that Reform Party policy. And thirdly, what about woke ideology in the schools and the institutions? I think lots of us can probably sense that our kids are being taught a rather warped, imbalanced version of British history, where they're basically taught to hate the country that they come from and to look back at their past with a sense of shame and embarrassment.
So one of the worst aspects of identity politics that has seeped into our schools is critical race theory, an import from America in the wake of the BLM movement. Now, I doubt any parents would object at all to their children being taught that racism and discrimination is wrong. I support that endeavour wholeheartedly. But critical race theory segregates people into categories of oppressors and victims based on the colour of their skin. It introduces racist language like white privilege, white fragility, and whiteness associated with negative. It pits our young against one another and projects grievances and blame between races and friends in the playground where none likely existed before. My daughter has experienced this firsthand herself at school. And it must not be allowed to re-racialise our schools in any way, nor unravel the great strides we have made towards rectifying inequality.
What the Reform Party is saying, the first party to say this, is that we should be teaching kids a balanced view of history. So if we're going to teach them about slavery and imperialism in British history, we should also be teaching them about all the things Britain did to stop slavery and imperialism. If we're going to talk about what happened in the West with slavery and imperialism, we should also talk about what's happening today in lots of non-Western countries. And why do that? Because we don't really want to raise generations of kids who are being basically indoctrinated in anti-Western, anti-British dogma.
A man addressing an unseen crowd. Big strong boys for farm work, he says. 400. 700. 700. 800. The numbers roll in. These men are sold for 1,200 Libyan pounds, $400 apiece. You are watching an auction of human beings. Another man, claiming to be a buyer. Off camera, someone asks, what happened to the ones from Niger? Sold off, he's told. CNN was sent this footage by a contact. After months of working, we were able to verify the authenticity of what you see here. We decided to travel to Libya to try and see for ourselves.
This isn't, by the way, as liberal progressives say, just about correcting how we think about our history. This is a very specific political project that's designed to deconstruct how we think about our history, to essentially erode our shared sense of collective memory.
So, History needs to be decolonised. My honourable friend from Earth and Thamesmead has already discussed how you can go through your whole of the GCSE and not have reference to any black authors at all. You can go through history thinking that, you know, the people that were enslaved were not a part of the uprising. You could go through history and not understand the richness of Africa and the Caribbean. You can go through history and not understand all the leaders in the black community. I mean, I'm surprised that the minister's actually asked me that, because it's so well documented that history needs to be decolonised.
Now, Reform is saying let's have a patriotic curriculum that gives kids a balanced view of history. How many Brits support that? 55% of all voters, a majority, say, I actually support that idea. Nearly 3/4 of Conservatives, 73% say, I support that policy. So what is the point behind all of this? Why am I sharing all of this with you? What I'm saying is, what Nigel Farage has realised and what the Reform Party have realised is there are millions of people out there who want meaningful action on immigration. They want to stop the small boats. They want to pay less of their money to countries overseas. They want British history, identity, culture and ways of life to be protected, preserved, and to be passed down to their kids from one generation to the next. And ultimately, they want the British national community to be prioritised above everybody else.
The country's dying, isn't it? I'm an Englishman in England and I don't feel like I'm an Englishman in England. Let's have it right. And I'm not afraid to say so.
That's ultimately what it means to be part of a national community. And I think Farage has realised that. That's why they're still hovering on 18% in the national polls. This isn't just about protest. This isn't just about rebelling against the Tories. This isn't just about rebelling against Westminster. And this isn't just about rebelling against the political class. This is actually becoming an instrumental vote, a vote that people are choosing because they agree with the core policies that are being advocated by Nigel Farage and Reform. And that is a really big problem for our political establishment. So if you like this video, hit like and subscribe. Stay with me for this year of elections. Come join us at mattgoodwin.org. 40,000 like-minded people who are gathering to debate and discuss these crunch elections from the UK to the US to France, all talking about many of the things that don't make it into our national conversation. So I'll see you there. Thanks for listening.